Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to Fun Palais, and today as we start an episode of Storytime, last week we just ended season 3, well actually 2 weeks ago, but we have a special guest with us today, and her name is Kristjana Hilberg, and she is a content creator, avid connector, freelance mentor. She has 10 years of experience in the client experience industry and is driven to help all women that she comes in contact with unlocking their potential and succeed. As a mentor, Kristjana focuses to empower women to start a side hustle or leave their 9-to-5 job completely to become their own boss. Kristjana, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you today?
I am doing so well, and I am so excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am too. Each interview, I'm like super psyched. And so like you would think I won money every time I'm interviewing somebody. And I'm talking to people I don't even know, but it's just the experience is phenomenal. You know, after speaking to all the interviewees, I thought my story was something. And as I start to listen to other people's stories, I'm like, Shirley, you have nothing. And
Oh,
everyone,
girl.
yes. And you have no idea. Everyone's story is phenomenal in its own way. And I
Yes.
applaud all my interviewees who come on to find the strength and to make themselves so vulnerable to share their story because society always makes it, you don't normalize that. No, you
Mhm.
need to act like your life is perfect and you have no issues. We all know that's not the case.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And that's why, as a fellow podcaster myself, that's why I started my own podcast. I'm like, every human that I know and come in contact with has an amazing story, like something about it that's just moving, touching. And so that's why I started my podcast. I'm like, share your story. Like, there's always going to be at least one person on the other end who's going to relate, and it could transform their life. Like, it's so important to share our stories with the world. So I
I
love that I get to share my story with you because I'm usually on the other end listening to everybody else's stories, pausing my, like muting my mic, crying because I'm so moved, and then I'm like, "Oh my god, I'll probably be crying in this episode talking about my own," but it's great.
It's okay. I want all those emotions come out. I want people to know this is reality here. This is real life.
Yes.
These interviews are never scripted. They're pretty much as we go. That's how I do them all. So
Mhm.
if you need to cry, girl, you could cry. I get it. It is okay.
Good, and nobody else is gonna hopefully see my ugly cry, they'll just hear it,
No.
so that's fine.
No, I always tell people get as comfy as you need to. I'm here in my robe, because people are listening to us. So they have no idea. Like, even though we're seeing each other, I'm here in my robe with my blanket.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
we're both comfy. So, the voice just makes it sound all luxurious and nice. And we're in like some really big studio. Not
Love it. Kitchen table,
exactly.
robes, love it.
Exactly. All right. So start with us your story and how life has impacted you tremendously to be where you are today.
Mm. It's funny when people ask, like, who are you? Or share with us your story. I was just telling somebody else this a couple weeks ago. I'm like, I always feel like I need to start when I was like 5 years old. I'm like, so we're sitting here for 5 years, for 5 more hours talking about it. But I'm like, it really does start, right? As a child, that like, and what you remember, like going back to your first memory and growing up and looking back and being like, whoa, like, I'm going to be 31 this year. And so just kind of like looking back at the past decades and seeing how I was shaped and now being able to look at it with like a 2020 vision instead of actually like experiencing it. But I think to save us all 5 hours of time, I will just start I'll save us a few years. So I'll just start with 18. But I remember I grew up in a super religious household. Um, my both of my parents were raised Mormon, and so I naturally was raised in the LDS church. If you don't know a lot about the LDS faith, it's a pretty strict religion, um, with like a dress code, word of wisdom, so like no alcohol, just very, like, I would say rule based. At least that's how I was raised, at least in my household. Like there were always rules that you followed. You don't really question the rules, you just follow them, and that was just life. And my parents got divorced when I was 14, and it wasn't really a shock to me. Like my dad was always kind of a icky human anyway, so it wasn't really surprising that they got divorced. It was almost like expected. But that still doesn't take away from having to now go through the emotions of your dad's moving out, your mom becomes a single parent, and then that kind of just changed our entire family dynamic because now she was a single mom working from, 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. And my brother and I were I was a teenager. I was 14, he was 11. And so we just kind of had to, I wouldn't say fend for ourselves, but in a way, I mean, we would go to school, we would go to whatever sport we were in at the time, get home and kind of start dinner. And then when my mom got home, I mean, she was exhausted and we would just kind of relax or do our church things. And then it was the next day already, and just kind of going through that. And I remember through those hard times and those years of my mom now having to be both roles, right? Now she's like the fun mom, but she now also has to be the disciplinarian. And she also
Exactly.
now is the only income. And
Exactly.
I,
Now, I have a question for you. Now,
yeah,
you said only two. I was on a flight the other day and I met this awesome, phenomenal Mormon couple. I didn't even know they were Mormon until after.
yeah,
But first of all, I wouldn't have assumed they were Norman because in my mind, I thought the dress code was like really, really strict. But I realize it's only when you go to temple
yeah.
because I've been to Salt Lake City and
Hmm.
we went to the church out there next to the church, kind of next to the archives. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep, yep.
I've been to that church and they were all properly dressed. So I assumed that like that's how they looked all the time. And I was told no, when they're in temple, they have to look a certain way. But outside of temple, they could wear normal stuff. They're not going to be wearing booty shorts, but they
Hmm.
can wear a dress a little bit above the knee and stuff like that. So that's one thing I did. And so not every Mormon has a whole bunch of kids because one couple had 6 children, the other couple
Hmm.
had 7 children. And I asked the girl, I said, so why'd you stop at 7? She said to me, 7 is the number of completion. Yeah, I'm assuming you understand exactly
Hmm.
what she means.
Yes.
And we don't need to go into that here. If y'all interested, y'all can Google and find out what all that means. But she was like, 7 is the number of completion. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's hilarious though, because to me, like when I hit third, like I was like, that's the number of completion for me. We are done. So maybe that's what she meant. I'm not
I
sure,
don't
but
know what she meant, but she was like, she didn't do a big explanation, but she was like something about 7 being the number of completion, and I was just like, okay. It wasn't all like I need to go research, but it was just interesting. They were really cool, really funny, really down to earth. So it was just, I just wanted to bring that up because I was like, wait, how many kids does her mom have as a single mother? That's the first thing that came to mind. Like, oh my goodness, single mom. Are we talking about 6, 7, 8 children?
oh girl, no. My mom, yeah, we there was 2, and that was good. And maybe she stopped at 2 because some sort of inner knowing knew that, down the road that would happen, or maybe higher
Yeah.
power stopped her at 2 because they knew, or he knew, she knew what she was gonna go through. Who knows?
Exactly. True.
Um, but with all of this being said, I always speak from my own experience. And just because I talk about the Mormon faith a lot or talk about like my experience in the church, just to be clear, some of my absolute favorite humans on the planet are Mormon. Just because
Mhm.
I don't practice anymore means nothing in the sense of like, do I still love those people? 100%. Like, my experience with the religion is only my experience, and that's that. But yes, I think that coming back to like dress code really quick, there's some people too who take those guidelines as like
Hmm.
very seriously. So if a
Oh, okay.
guideline comes out and you say, you really shouldn't wear something 2 inches above the knee, like that's the cutoff, then some people take that extremely seriously, right? Other people are
Okay.
like, it's a
Eh,
guideline. I'll just kind of do whatever feels best for me. Or
okay.
I haven't been to the temple yet, so I don't really like need to, because once you go to the temple, you get the garments, which are like your underwear that you really can't wear anything over that
Oh,
or else it shows. So like the sleeves are cap sleeve, and then the bottoms are basically like this high above your knee. So
yes.
if you did choose to wear, booty shorts or a kind of a shorter dress, those would show for sure. And so I think that it just kind of like depends, like you said, this lady, or if these people had been to the temple yet, or if they hadn't, and kind of just like how serious you are, just like any religion or
Hmm.
anything. It's just kind of how you interpret the guidelines, how they work for you, and then you just implement them in your life as you see fit.
And you were right, because one thing I realized about the temple when I was on that trip is if you've had a coffee or alcohol, you can't go to temple. Again, I don't really want to know the ins and outs and details of it, but that's the guideline of the temple. But when it comes to Christianity, regardless what you fall under, it all is the underlying body same thing. I was raised in a Christian home as well, and very strict. My grandfather was a pastor, and we were raised Baptist,
Okay.
very strict. I mean, you don't talk about sex. You shouldn't be having sex until after marriage.
Mhm.
All those falls under. First of all, I wasn't allowed to go to the movies. I wasn't allowed to go over a friend's house to have like sleepovers.
Yeah,
No,
sleepovers.
none of that. Mm-mm, you don't do that. No. Why you want to go to somebody's house for what? What's wrong with your home right here? What? You don't do that.
Oh,
None of
mhm.
that. Going to a movie was a sin. You don't want to watch that stuff.
Mm,
Everything was under the SIN word.
yep.
Everything was a sin. So I know what it means to be in a Christian home, regardless what denomination you fall under.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that that's kind of what led to, the experiences that I then had, like
Mm-hmm.
leaving, because and I would say that it started to really, gosh, spiral isn't the right word, but I started getting like annoyed or angry because my mom went from being like this almost like more like a friend type parent to more of like a strict disciplinarian. And I did not understand her until I became a single mom myself years later. And I had no idea what she was going through and maybe why she was the way that she was. All I could see was, being a 16-year-old girl and being like, "How dare you?" I'm totally like that Freaky Friday scene where it's like, "You're ruining my life." And I
Yep.
remember like feeling that, being like, "How dare you tell me that like I can't stay out until 11? Like all of my other friends have don't have curfews, and like now I do, and this is like so ridiculous." But I was also scared of disappointing her. I was scared of getting in trouble. I so I think that those teachings from the religion, and her being so like dead set on discipline, that I could not wait to get out. Like, and I remember turning 18, and I turned 18 a month before graduation, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
just so you know, the day after graduation, like, I am out of here. And she was like, great,
Go
whatever,
ahead.
go. Yeah. And I mean, she was super supportive. It's not that she wasn't, but she was also like, I mean, okay, whatever. And so I was packed up. Like my car was completely packed up. I was out of there. I think I even woke up, and we had like a grad party, grad night.
Mm-hmm.
And we were up until like 4 a.m. And I remember like being like, okay, see ya. Been up all night, ready to get out of here. And she was like, okay, bye. Like, I'll talk to you later. And me just getting out of there as fast as I could. And I went to Phoenix because I grew up in Arizona, and I grew up in a really tiny town in northern Arizona. And I remember being like, Phoenix, here I come. Like my life is just gonna be incredible and amazing. And I can't wait to get to the big city. And oh my gosh, I
Not what you
little,
envisioned?
not what I envisioned. And a lot of that again goes back to kind of like my experience. I was never allowed to experiment for myself while I was in a safe environment. I mean, I really think that that would have been extremely beneficial for me and my personality. And I think a lot of people can relate is like as soon as somebody tells you, don't look in the box, you want to look in the box, right? That's all you can think about. And so I've been growing up being told, don't think about sex, don't talk about sex, don't even like drugs are a not like don't even bring up drugs. Drugs aren't a thing, like alcohol, absolutely not, stay away. So of
Mhm.
course I'd been told this for so many years and so often that what do you think I'm interested in knowing all about, right? I want to know sex, drugs, and rock and roll because I have never like experimented or even been around people who had. So it was all extremely intriguing to me. And what I wish would have been taught to me, and now as a mother, I'm hoping that I can teach my kids this, is that like maybe why you wouldn't want to drink, right? Like, oh, when you drink, your thinking becomes impaired. You can become extremely sick, alcohol poisoning. You could like there's other reasons behind why maybe you wouldn't want to drink or maybe why you wouldn't want to do drugs instead of just don't even think about it, don't talk about it. I want to know why and like legitimate reasons or maybe even given like the opportunity to try it in a safe environment instead of just being like out in the
No.
wild with
Mhm.
everybody trying it and not understanding like how to protect myself or how to do it responsibly because an 18-year-old being responsible like that's rare maybe.
Uh, I agree with you 100%. Now that I'm a mother, I agree with you. I feel like there's two parts to this. Number one, and I always will say this, my mother did the best that she could. I love her to death. I do. And now, as I'm a mature adult and I have a very open mind and thinking, I realize she did what she knew. She did what she was comfortable with.
Yes, yes.
So I can't fault her from that. There
Mm-mm.
are things I may not have been happy with her about, but now it's time for me to unlearn these behaviors, and I'm
Yeah,
not going to be that way with my children. I agree
exactly.
with you 100%. My approach with my kids are so different when it comes to sex. Since they were little, introduced small doses of
Hmm.
sex to them, age appropriate small doses.
Yep.
When it comes to drugs and alcohol, first of all, I would be a hypocrite to say, drinking is wrong, don't do it, as I'm holding my glass of wine. My
Hmm.
kids know I drink wine, and I have no shame. Yep, that's right. Your mother's having a glass of wine.
Hmm.
Anything can be unhealthy.
Oh yeah.
Anything can be unhealthy if
Hmm.
not learned how to balance properly. There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine, having a drink. You just need to practice self control. Rather
Hmm.
it's drugs, rather it's your credit cards, rather it's your money, rather it's sexual activity.
Right. Everything.
Anything can become unhealthy. So I agree with you 100%. It's the approach. And now, as mothers, we're doing it differently. And
Hmm.
and I don't like to use the excuse, oh, my mom. But I know what my mom did, and I share my experiences as a child, but I don't use that as my crutch.
No.
Well, because she ain't do this, no, I'm gonna unlearn that and I'm gonna do it differently. So I agree with you 100%.
I mean, and my mom and I have had multiple conversations about this. And I try and I say every time, don't ever think that like I'm blaming you for
Mm-hmm.
anything. Like totally what you said. This is what you knew. You were doing what you like felt was the best way. And so I know that you were showing up as with totally like with love and support of how you thought that you should. And that's like I don't blame
Exactly.
her in the least. Like,
Exactly.
at
Exactly.
all. But it definitely has shaped how I want to show up as a parent or
Mm-hmm.
things that I have loved, the things that she instilled in me that I like will cherish forever, but also
Hmm.
things that I'm like, how can I maybe, show up like she did, but just teach it in a different way. And I also
Exactly.
think each kid is so different. And I'm sure you can attest to that with children. Like just because I teach my oldest a certain way does not mean that my second is going to learn the same way. So it's almost like learning to be flexible and approaching the situation like for that specific child instead of just like a blanket statement, you know?
Exactly. Yep. I agree. I agree.
And so, kind of back to being 18 and completely reckless was I I was exactly that. Like I went from never experimenting, not even really like letting myself think about it because I felt like it was a sin to even consider it. Like it was a sin to even like think that I would enjoy alcohol or having sex with my boyfriend because
Hmm.
it was a sin.
It was shunned upon.
Right, exactly. And who was I going to talk to about it? Like all my other Mormon friends who were also being taught the same thing? No. Like who do you talk to about it? My mom? Absolutely not. And so you have to find it elsewhere. Like you go to parties and you experiment and then that's kind of how you learn. And so I had some really rough lessons that first several months and I was completely like I think I was in shock to just even like be like, "Oh, wow. Like what just happened? How can I learn from this? Where do I go?" And I think that because I came home, right? I called my mom and I was like,
Oh, you went
"Oh
back
my
home?
gosh." I went back home because I was so terrified because I literally went from like doing nothing to within 6 weeks done everything, like
Girl, 6 weeks.
6 weeks. Like it was like go to church every day, never talk about anything to like let's have sex, let's do drugs, let's drink alcohol, let's all these things. And I was like, "What has happened?" And so I called my mom and I was like, actually, I didn't call my mom. I called a really close friend who
Hmm.
was kind of like they had stepped in when I was in high school and they kind of became like surrogate parents to help my mom with me and my brother. So I called her and I was like, I'm not going to give details, but holy shit. I don't know if this is but I
No,
was
you're
like,
fine. Cursing
I,
is okay.
and I was like, I need like support. I need something. And so she was like, "Great. How about I be the one to let your mom know? We'll get this all figured out." I came home. I had a conversation with my mom, made her emotionally sick, which I can understand as a parent.
Oh.
Made her emotionally sick. She didn't talk to me for like 3 days, probably
Oh
because she was
gosh.
like trying to work it out herself, which I didn't even know how I wanted her to respond, but not talking to me was like devastating. And so I stayed at home and I almost like locked myself in my house for a while. And I was trying to like process like what had happened, how I was going to move forward, all these things. And my mom said, "You should probably go talk to the bishop because, when you're a Mormon, that's kind of like being like a Catholic, you
Yep.
going to the
To
what
the
is he?
priest or no,
Priest. Yeah.
yeah, to the priest in
Confess
that little cubby hole.
in that like 4 by 2, yeah, little
Mhm.
space.
Yep.
And you need to go like confess all of these sins. And I was like, yikes. Um,
I don't wanna talk to him.
I don't want to talk to a male about this. And I also don't even know like if I'm ready. Like it's only been 6 weeks. And this person has known me my whole life. Like they have watched me grow up. I don't necessarily feel like I should go into his office alone and express what had just happened and what I had just been through. Like I didn't feel comfortable, but it was very like urged. Like, Chris, you need to do this.
Now, quick question. In the Mormon community, is the bishop seen as like the head therapist?
Yeah, I mean, this is the person that is like he leads that community. So in each city or each town, there's like they're called wards. So you're like divided into a certain
Oh,
ward depending on like where you live, your boundaries. And then that's
okay.
the person that you go to as like
Because you don't
For sure.
go, do you step outside and go see an actual therapist in the morning? Is that something that's encouraged?
You can.
Oh, you can. Okay. It's not
Yeah, you
shunned
can.
upon or not. No, you don't do that. Okay.
No, but I would say that a lot of the time, and again, I'm just speaking on my experience, a lot of the time, like if I was referred to a therapist, it was like a Mormon therapist. You know what
I
I mean?
see. I see. So you stay within that community, everything within that community. But the first
Yeah.
thing I've always heard, even in Investigation Discovery, I'm a queen of watching that show and I've seen some stuff. First thing, go talk to the bishop.
Yep. You gotta go to the bishop, sister. Yeah, that's like that is kind of like the go-to. And so kind of
Okay.
to go back to that, this is the same guy, right? That had when I was 17 years old, I had my first I was dating a boy and I let him touch my boobs. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, like now I feel dirty. I feel like it was a sin. I have to go talk to my bishop. When really on the inside, I was like, yes, because who doesn't love their boobs touched at 17? Like that feels good.
But
But
you know, that's the scary part. Girl, can you did okay. You're 17, someone's touching your boobs, and the first thing that comes to my oh my God, I need to go talk to my bishop. My boobs were touched.
yeah. And then you have to go and sit in front of this dude and say, like, my boyfriend was like fondling my boobs and it felt so good, but I feel so bad. I don't know. It's
Oh
like
Lord. Is the bishop
a
always a
trip.
male?
Mhm.
Never a
Always a male.
female. So you're
Mm-mm.
telling me even now in 2021, there is no female bishop.
No female bishop. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So
Very
there comes
interesting.
in the male patriarchy, right? Is just like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was listening to this podcast episode of This American Life, and it was talking about this, about how as a and this was just based on Mormons, but I'm sure with other churches, I'm not sure kind of how the whole like confession stuff goes, but I remember them specifically touching on that in the episode and being like, in what world would you, in what other scenario would you allow your 15-year-old daughter to be alone in a room with a male that's like 40, your daughter's 15, and confess your sins and have him be like, can you describe to me like how that happened? So you're basically describing this sexual experience to a male alone in a room. Like it's very like, would I ever approve that for like my daughter? No, I would never think that that was like quote unquote normal ever.
Ever. I agree with you. It's very similar to the Catholic community when they go into the priest to do their confession, to confess their sins.
Hmm.
Of course, I'm not Catholic. I wasn't into that. I went to Catholic school all my life from first grade to 12th grade. But,
Hmm.
you know, I was always the eyeball because I was Baptist. So even though I went to the Catholic school, I wasn't doing the Catholic things. I just was submerged upon it. But heck, you, we're told, you know, as a Baptist, you pray to God. That's it. You know, and I would never want my daughter to go speak to a pastor. We can speak to you, pray about it, reflect on it. But what is this grown ass man got to tell you? Or I'm going to be in the room.
Yes. Yes. Or I'm gonna be in the room. Or like, I just wish that maybe like finding solace and comfort in like yourself and your intuition and like what higher power or God is like telling you instead of seeking outside validation that you are now unworthy.
Yes.
Um and so it was kind of like it was like that again, right? So being back to my boob story when I was 17 and now I'm unworthy. So I'm unworthy now to go to the temple for a month and I now have to not partake of the sacrament, which is basically going up and taking like the bread and wine. I can no longer do that. So now I'm sitting in this tiny little Mormon town. Everyone knows me in the middle of sacrament. People can see me and I can't take the sacrament because I'm unworthy. And now my mom is thinking, why aren't you taking the sacrament? What have you done? So
Mm,
now it causes like contention between me and my mom. And now I have to be like, oh my gosh, I let him touch my boobs. And then it's like, how dare you? Like,
yep.
and
You're
so it,
seen as an abomination.
yes, yes. And now I'm like disappointing my mom, now I'm basically like wearing an S, right? The scarlet letter. Like now I'm wearing this on my chest of like, oh my gosh, Chris isn't taking the sacrament. What did she do? And it's like, I felt like I had to live. It almost teaches you, right, to live in secrecy, because if you don't, you're going to be looked upon, frowned upon, and judged. And who the fuck wants to be judged? Nobody. So then it teaches you to keep it inside instead of just live truthfully.
That's why it starts when you're young. The humiliation, the shame, and the judgment starts when you're young. Your parents don't even realize they're doing it. And then now, as an adult, I have to deal with society doing it to me. But when you
Mhm.
look back, my parents have been doing this to me, judging me, humiliating me when we compare our children. I hate that. I remember I said I will, and I till this day I've never compared my child to someone else's child. That is the worst thing you can do. Well,
Worst.
Susie Ann over here is getting straight A's in school. What the fuck does Susie Ann has to do with me? And this is what I'm telling you. As
Yep.
parents, we don't realize we're doing the same shit that
Mhm.
society does to us when we're adults, comparing and judging. But
Mhm.
I hate parents who think like they were never teenagers. They are perfect. They never made mistakes. They never did drugs, never did alcohol. We're not telling you to keep things, to divulge all your business to your kids. But
No.
let your kids realize that, honey, I made mistakes too. Honey, I'm not
Mhm.
perfect.
Right.
I
No.
understand what you're going through, but we don't talk to our children like that because we always act as though we are superior to our children, not realizing these are blessings that were given to us for us
Mhm.
to lead and guide to the best of our abilities for the first 18 years of their life. And we have to do the best that we know how to do. But no,
Yeah.
we have this superior attitude, and our children are inferior. And
Yeah.
parents don't realize they do that. And we do,
Mhm.
and they do. And even myself, I had to catch myself a couple times like, wait, Shirley, scale back. Scale
Mhm.
back. What are you doing? I've apologized to my kids. And girl, that feels weird.
It really does. But
It
no, I'm on the
really
same way.
does.
Mhm.
Girl.
Well, and I think that like what we've talked about too of in society of like showing that you live like a perfect life and that there's really like showing up on Instagram or showing up on social media in general like, hey, this is my beautiful family, like we're doing
Yep.
so well, and I'm like, no, when is that ever? Like it's okay to show up also as like just a real human, and that's what people relate to anyway. Like, I mean, yeah, aesthetically, your feed looks really beautiful, but like other than
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, what else is there? And so I think that from such a young age, when you are shamed or judged, it kind of leads you to lead that more aesthetically pleasing looking life and not acknowledge when you're like, whoa, okay, shit is getting real. How
Absolutely.
how do I deal with it? Instead of putting on a mask, instead of just being like transparent.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. They don't prepare us for that's what they don't prepare us for because
Mhm.
it's not normalized as a child. Like it's not normalized to say mistakes are okay, but learn from them, grow from them. No,
Mhm.
I'm going to shame you and I'm going to let you know how much of a piece of shit you are because of what you did. You let a boy touch your boobs, you're fucking shit. Do you hear me?
Oh, totally. Well, and then girl, oh my gosh. So this whole thing happened, right, with my bishop.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing happened with my boobs at 17, and then at 18 when I had gone through this whole thing in the matter of 6 weeks, and I finally was just like, "Whatever, I'll just go to the bishop." The bishop was completely, I mean, what do you do when somebody comes to you and tells you basically like everything you've been teaching them, right, for their whole life, they just went and like erased all of that. I think he was completely in shock. I mean, I've known this man my whole life. So now, whether he wants to or not, he's going to view me differently. Like
Uh-huh.
it's
He
just
is.
how it is. So, yeah, great. God gives you the lens of being like his service, like you're in the service of the Lord. Great. But that still doesn't mean you're a human and you're going to now be like, oh shit. Like every time you see me, you're now all those like visions that I just told you in our meeting are going to pop up. Like it's just natural. It's a human thing. And so when you're Mormon and you confess sins that like strictly go against everything you're taught, like having sex and breaking the word of wisdom and all of these things, there's consequences. So, as an 18-year-old girl, I now have to face church court, which means,
Wha-
yeah, girl, just listen
What?
to this. Just
I'm
listen
sorry
to
to
this.
laugh. And for any Mormon out there, listen, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but girl, what?
So, church court at 18, where a board of old white men, I have to go and sit in front of them
Are
and
there black people in the Mormon church? Or very rare do you find black people?
well, I guess I can't speak for the church as a whole. However, up until I think the 80s, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but I think it was up until like sometime in the 80s, there was like no black people within the church
Okay, so I
until
guess
like,
now they're accepting because you could always convert. I know
yes.
people who converted into what's the plural? Mormonism.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and totally, and,
So
like yeah, and so, like, missionaries were not going to, like, outside of the US really, and I think that I mean, I think that you could maybe even be a person of color, of any, like, Asian descent, um, Latinx, like, any you could be other than a white person, right? But you couldn't
uh-huh.
hold a, like, leadership position.
I see. Okay, so that's
Mhm.
still something they're not doing. You can convert as a Mormon, but don't even think about going into any type of leadership. And when you say leadership, I'm assuming the bishop and those people who are
Yeah.
in that courtroom that you're about
Like
to see.
bishop, like stake president, mission president, quorum of the 12 apostles, the prophet, like it's
Oh,
very
okay.
rare that you see somebody of color. I mean, I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened, but it's extremely rare. Like it's usually white men. I mean,
Gotcha. And that
it's
makes sense. I totally understand. I get it.
and
Okay.
so but I mean, that's even a whole other piece that I didn't
I
even
know.
realize. Like, I'm like, what religion have I been a part of that's like systemically, like, a racist religion? What the fuck have I been like indoctrinated to believe? Like, without even being like told that, but just like, this is what we represent. And it's
Mhm.
all white people. So it's
But
very,
it's not girl, it's not even more when you think about okay, Mormon, but then you think of Buddhism. When you think of Buddhism, you automatically think of the Asians. When you
mm,
think of Muslims, you automatically think of India and Pakistan.
yeah.
You understand? So it's several. Even though right now in 2021, there are people of different nationalities converting,
Yeah.
but mainly just those two examples, when you think of those are the ethnicities that you think about associated with Buddhism or Muslim. If you think of
Right.
Muslim, you automatically think, oh, they're from India. No, that's not true. Because
No,
there are
it's
Asian
totally
Muslims, there are African Muslims, but you automatically associate it with one race. So I get what you're saying. I totally can relate and understand. But
yeah.
let me hear about this courtroom in your church that you're now presented with because of the activities that you have done within the last 6 weeks and what the
So
consequences and girl, are the consequences going to shock me? Let me hear this.
consequences. Oh my gosh. So I now have to present like basically this exact same thing, which now, I mean, it was traumatic. So now I'm just reliving this shit like over and over because I have to like present it to a board of these men who have watched me as a child grow up. And now I have to like sit in front of them and basically be like, this is what happened. And you don't just say, like, I had sex, you like give detail. So they like ask you questions upon this and like where your heart is sitting. And I'm just like, my heart doesn't know what just happened. So I can't really like ask me that in a year. I don't know. But anyway, at this time, this was like right before I was supposed to go to college again. And originally,
Okay.
I was enrolled to go to college in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to play softball and I obviously walked away from all of that. So now it was time to find a new school. And my mom was like, "Well, how about you just go to Flagstaff? It's an hour away, so you're still
Mhm.
close, but you're not in town. There's a great Mormon community." I was like, "Oh god, what do I feel about Mormons right now?" I wasn't even sure, but it was all I knew, right? And so she made me when I was looking for a place to stay, she was like, "You better just live with Mormons." And I was like, "I guess." So she, helped like secure my deposit with these five other Mormon girls. And during this time, my bishop was like, "Let's give you," so I had already kind of met with these men and
Okay.
had presented, and he said, "Let's give it 3 months to just like sit, and during this time, we'll be praying, we'll be, deciding, God will be speaking to us and letting us know how we should proceed." And I was like, "Great, whatever." And so went off to college, didn't really change what I was doing. Like, I was just like, you know what? Whatever. Alcohol drowns it out. Like, if you want to forget shit and you just want to have a really great time, drink a bottle or two of wine, right? Or
Exactly.
whatever. So I was just kind of, I was living with these Mormon girls. I was kind of doing Mormon things. Like, I would sometimes go to church, I would go to Mormon activities, whatever. And the 3 months came up and I traveled back home ready for my court. And
Ready
they,
for your reappearance, girl. Mormons, I'm telling you,
court
don't be
ready.
upset with me because
Oh,
this is just to me funny.
yeah, it's a
It
fucking
really
trip.
is.
It's a trip.
But I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards the religion. I'm gonna put that out there because I know I may have Mormons that listen, but this is crazy.
Well, and maybe they can give, like, if they've had a similar experience or haven't and they have, like, it's always great to hear somebody else's experience.
True.
So
So
it's
now you
a
have
good
to
thing.
reappear into court. Your your new court date.
Yes, new court date, ready to go. And I come in and they were like, "How have you been living your life these last 3 months?" And I was like, like a college student. I don't know. Eating McDonald's, drinking 5 times a week, and, like, having a really great time." And they were like, "God has told us that you should be," and we all prayed together, like, at the end of this. So
Okay.
we're like praying. The bishop is like, "God, what's the best thing for this?" We're kind of like sitting in silence for a while. We stand up and he's like, "You know what? God has said that you need to be disfellowshipped," which means that you don't lose your membership in the church. You just lose your um what is that? Like, I can't speak in church, I can't hold a calling, I can't really do anything. I have to like retake the missionary lessons.
This
Just
sounds like you're losing your membership to the club.
yeah, basically, like they're like, "Listen, we don't really
Yeah.
like you that much anymore." Um, and then that was that. Like, okay, we need to get you on like a church advisory plan, like how you're going to get reinstated. And I was like, okay, still not really like really understanding or grasping, and a kind of like a fuck you all type of
Yes.
deal.
The way
And
you're looking at me now, I can see your face then when you were going through this
like I'm just
situation,
like,
like all in your mind, like fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and fuck you.
that was totally it. And so I was just like, thank you so much for your time. I'll see you hopefully never. So I go back to school and I'm on like a church advisory council where now you just go to another bishop, right? Another whatever ward I'm in, the bishop contacts you and are like, "I hear that you have been disfellowshipped. Let's get you back to the fold." And I'm like, "Okay, sure. Like I'll
Ah,
meet with you, whatever." And I actually did really like this dude. I liked this bishop. He was super laid back, low key. I
okay.
think he actually had a child who had like left the church. So I think that he was more like
Okay.
uh down, I guess, with like maybe what I was going through. And so he was very low key, very just there as like a support person. He was extremely
Okay.
kind. Um, but he referred me to read this book written by a prophet back in like the 1980s.
Okay.
I should have looked up what this book was called, but it was written by President Spencer W. Kimball, and I can't remember the name, but it was basically talking about sin and how you could come back from sin. This book should never be read ever if you
Really?
are like already feeling like a piece of shit, because I mean, he really does say like sexual sin is next to murder in the church. So it's basically like murder is unforgivable and sexual sin is second next to murder. So it was like you're basically like the worst human. Can you imagine that as an 18-year-old person reading these words? I'm already like, I'm fucked. Like, I am literally a piece of shit. How will anybody want to be with me? I've defiled my body. How would a boy want to ever marry me now? Like, all these thoughts going through my head as an 18
This
year
is
old.
a book. Oh my gosh. And people are actually reading this. And I guarantee you, there are people that are reading this book like, oh my God, this is it. This is the word. Because obviously you think opposite of it, but you know there's another human being out there that think this book is life.
Oh, yeah. Well, and why is it being recommended? And is it, I don't know if it's still recommended. I'm like, this was a decade, more than a decade ago. So maybe it's not even recommended, but why was it ever recommended? Like,
Recommended.
if a true sin, like somebody who had been through all of the things that he was writing about in this book, if somebody had been through that and was like a church leader and was reading it, they should have immediately been like, whoa, we should never recommend this book to somebody who's already thinking of themselves so low, who's already living a shame based lifestyle. Like, they should never read this book. This is maybe like a book to recommend once they're 10 years down the road, but not a
Hmm.
book to read when you're in the middle of it. And so I started reading this book and it almost was just made me even more be like, Mormons are fucking psychos. Like, this is an
Oh,
awful, this is insane. And but I was still kind of like immersing myself in like the college culture. I was going to like, because when you're in a singles ward as a Mormon, they have a bunch of like singles activities, right? That you go to and you immerse yourself so that you can meet your mate and get
what's
married.
what's a singles ward within the college?
So a singles ward is when you move to college and you're a single Mormon person, you join a singles ward. Girl, if you've never watched Singles Ward, it's a movie. You need to watch it. It is totally like the epitome of what it's like to be a Mormon person and go to like church as a single person instead of like as a
Okay.
family,
Uh
like in a
huh.
family. But I remember this one time I went, and these are pretty big. Like, my ward was pretty big. There was probably 500 people
Oh, that's a
that
lot.
were all singles, right?
Okay.
So I show up at this activity and it's like a Halloween dance party, whatever.
Okay.
And before you start a event, you pray, and then after the event, you pray. So it was like 11:30, because Mormons have that curfew of got to be home by midnight. I don't know if that's a real thing, but kind of seems like it. And anyway, the event's ending at like 11:30. This girl standing next to me is like in charge of the whole thing. And she has the microphone and she's like, okay, we're going to end with a prayer. And she turns to me and says, hey, can you give our prayer? Now, remember, I've been disfellowshipped. I cannot give the prayer. Like, it's against policy for me to give a prayer. And I said, oh, I can't. And over the microphone, she's like, stop acting like like, I can't remember what she said, but like, stop acting like a brat. Like, just give the prayer. And I was like, no, like, I can't. Like, I can't give the prayer. She thought that I was just like refusing to give
Uh,
the prayer.
gotcha.
And she was so unkind to me over the mic in front of 400 people. And I was like, bitch, like, I wanted to be like, but I was so shamed for the fact that I wasn't now in front of 400 other peers and she's making me look like I'm just being like a whiny bitch for not wanting to give the prayer when essence that wasn't it at all. I would have totally given the prayer. I'm not embarrassed to be on a microphone in front of people, but I couldn't. It was against policy. And I feel like myself now would be like, listen, and like actually probably just like
Say.
broadcast that in front of everybody. But when I was that age and already shamed for that, I was like, it almost just kept like pounding me down to like, you aren't worthy, you aren't good enough. And I was just like, now
This is scary
mhm,
to hear you say the words, it was against policy to give a prayer. It's prayer. Now, of course, I am not the one to be making any extra comments about the Mormon life, but to me, that just sounds wrong. It's a prayer.
mhm, mhm.
It's a
And
prayer. And there might be someone out here that when they listen to this episode that may have a more deeper explanation to provide me, and that's great. I'm willing to listen. But
Yeah.
it's against policy. I've been disfellowship. I cannot pray.
Like I could
That
pray.
alone, that's wrong. I don't, girl, I don't care if it was 20 people in the room.
Mhm.
It's a prayer.
Right. Well, and really, God, the God that I worship is a God that loves you and accepts you no matter or
Exactly.
not. If you've had sex or been drinking 5 seconds before you say the prayer, he still loves you and knows your heart. Like, why can't I then bless, everybody else
He
who's in the
accepted
room?
Mary the prostitute.
Right. So I'm just
Girl.
like, it doesn't make sense with like the deeper teachings of we're a Christ-centered church. We teach how to love, we teach how to accept, we teach how to um bring people together, but
Mhm.
you made a mistake, so now you're not allowed to speak in front of everybody. When really that should almost be like nurtured. Like maybe
Exactly.
other people in the audience could relate to you. Maybe they're suffering, going through the same shit you are, and just can't find their voice to talk about it. Like maybe you could help them. So it should almost be like the exact opposite. But girl, that whole entire experience, I think, really tainted my view. And not on, because people in any religion can be dicks, right? Anybody can
Yep.
be a mean, unkind person. I'm not saying that Mormons are bad and mean people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that my experiences with the people who were following the teachings and the guidelines of the Mormon church like instilled shit and like into my mind that was just grounded in there and kind of laid the framework for my entire like tornado brain for the next several years because I felt so much shame around everything and that I was literally like I was just a fucking tornado everywhere, just like wrecking everything in my path, not even understanding like what I was doing and understanding that it was coming from the end, like loving myself. Like I had
Yep.
no self love, but I was trying to find love anywhere that I could find it. Literally, I was just reaching. I wanted anybody to love me. And even if that was just for like 5 minutes. And that's what led to all of it. I mean, led to infidelity in my marriage, led to a divorce, that led to me even yet at 26 being like, what am I doing with my life? Where am I?
Mhm.
Like, how have I come here? Like, what is happening? And then starting to actually do the deeper inner work because for so long I'd been trying to find validation outside because that's what I had been taught. Go to a bishop. Go to a bishop.
Exactly.
He'll help you. He'll save you. He'll tell you what you need to do. No, like I needed to learn how to love myself first.
It starts with us. It starts
Mhm.
with us. And don't feel bad. Let me tell you, all religions have guidelines. It's not just Mormons. It's
Yeah.
not. No matter what religion you come from, they have a strict guideline that you have to follow. And when it comes to sex, when it comes to drugs, when it comes to all those things, they're all like huge sins. And if you do them, you're an abomination. I like that word
Mhm.
because that's what they see you as, an abomination. An abomination. But women like you and us, we're learning to normalize this stuff through our podcasts to let
Mhm.
people know, listen, life is not always cakes, cupcakes and peaches and roses. There are bad times, and it is okay to, I'm having a bad day. Not today. Not right now. Things aren't going good. Life happens. Life sucks
Mhm.
sometimes. But you're right. It all starts with you. And it's those layers when you were children, as you got older now, you're starting to peel back. You're starting to
Mm,
be like, that's the reason why.
yeah. And and
Yeah.
and how do you too though, as a spouse, right, who's now kind of just put your husband through a bunch of shit, how do you then come to him later and say, that wasn't me. That was a version of me who hated myself, who
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand. Like it doesn't sorry is not enough. Like saying that is not enough. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's hard to then you have to like leave this thing in ashes that will never come back. It will never
Exactly.
it's not a phoenix, right? It doesn't come back in the
Exactly.
ashes. So now you have to step away from the ashes that you just burnt, rebuild a whole nother life and figure out your values now and
Mhm.
how you're never going to let that shit happen again with yourself or with your children. So it's like, it really to me felt like I was starting an entire new life because I was like having to dig so deep inside of myself to be like, okay, let's unlearn all the shit you learned. Let's
Exactly.
now figure out, what do I believe? What how can I change? How can I love myself? How can I show up? And it was a complete like, it took a few years, I mean, to even feel back to myself. It was like finding who I was again, and when was I ever that person? Because starting at such a young age, I was taught all of the doctrines within a strict religion that I don't ever know if I was able to, like, establish who I truly was, and so it was almost like finding myself for the first time because I had never been that person. At least I felt like I'd never been given the choice to be
Mhm.
that person. And so now that I feel so liberated in that, it's like I want to just fucking scream it from the rooftops. And I had somebody ask me the question the other day. It's like, why do you want to scream it? Like, why do you want to show up and talk about these things, right? And be so transparent. And I'm like, it's in hopes that somebody else who is either going through what I went through or is raising a teen and is kind of like instilling in them those beliefs that they can be like, "Oh shit, like long-term effects, what's going to happen?" And like hopefully instill that people can change and you can unlearn and you
Mhm.
can come out like happier and better and completely build a life that you want to live. Um but girl, I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I wouldn't have gone through and made all of those mistakes that I did, or even just like make those choices that I make. I don't know if I would have been able to find this life and build this life that I have now because I feel like I'm finally choosing it. Like I am totally choosing the way that I live my life. And I don't know if I would have ever done that.
But those experiences are testimonies. You took that negative in your life and you have intentionally turned it into a positive. And not everybody does that because we have the human beings that want to blame every single day of their life. Everything they do is based on my childhood. My father was an alcoholic. My father was this. My mother was this. I wasn't loved. I wasn't this. But what are you doing to change that?
Mhm.
They did the best that they could. There's no manual to this thing called life. There's no manual to being a parent. But once you get older and you know right from wrong, what are you doing to change that? Or are you just
Mhm.
going to blame for the rest of your life? Which
Right?
is, it sucks for people who do that. I don't like people who do that. You know, you can speak about it in a way where this happened in my childhood, this happened in my childhood, but this is what I'm doing to combat it. This is what I'm doing to change it. Don't sit there and just say, my mom sucks, my dad sucks, my mom did this, my mom. They did the best that they could. All right, let's just get over that. And what are you doing to better your life now?
Exactly.
You know,
Mm.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
One, do you think there are children in the Mormon community that goes through the same experiences that you go through, but yet they lie right in front of their
Mm.
parents' face, right in front of their bishop's face, and just modify the Mormon life when need be?
Oh,
Because you were
yeah.
truthful. Your boobs were touched. You went to the bishop. You left at 18. You came back at 6 weeks. Your mom said, go to the bishop. You went to the bishop. So you were like a goody girl
Yeah.
because every wrong you did, you told someone, and
Mhm.
what they tell you, go to the bishop. But how many people in the Mormon community are having sex and are just not saying anything about it and are modifying it as they need be? How many people are drinking alcohol and going to the temple and not
Mm.
saying anything about it? And we will never know unless someone chooses to confess about it. But I guarantee you it's happening.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I have friends, like,
Oh,
even
okay. So you
today.
know of people.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
So it is happening. All right.
but I really do think that it all stems down. I mean, I even said it, right? I was scared. I was fearful of getting in trouble, that I would rather just, "What?" You know, word vomit it all out than just, like, hold it in, because that
Mm-hmm.
shit eats at me. Like, I can't hold shit in. Like, even when I cheated on my husband, I was not able to hold that in for long, like, days, hours, like, because I know people, I have friends who have had full-blown affairs for longer than like a year, 2 years. They live separate lives. Like they literally don't
Oh,
say it. I could not
girl,
like,
there are people that will take it to the grave. There's two parts to infidelity. You either tell your significant other or you take it to the grave and they
oh
never
yeah,
find out. That's it. Now, how old were you when you got married?
gosh, 21.
Okay. And how many years into the relationship was the infidelity?
This is a deeper subject. So, really quick though, guess who was my bishop when I was preparing to be married and having to confess all of my sins? His dad. So now I'm sitting in front of my
What?
future father-in-law as
Wait,
my
did you get
bishop.
did you get back into the like did they give you your membership back? That's what I'm
Girl,
gonna call
girl. Okay. So my husband, my first husband was he had grown up Mormon, but he
it.
was kind
Okay.
of on the same path as me. Like we had both strayed and
Okay.
that's kind of where we found each other, right? Is in our
Okay.
straying years. But then
Okay.
together we were like, you know what? Maybe together we could become Mormon again, start a family, because again, it's indoctrinated into your brain that this is
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do to have a
Mm-hmm.
happy life. And with both of our families still being extremely Mormon, it just seemed like that's what we should do, right? The should monster. This is what you should do. So together, we became Mormon again. And through that, I had to be reinstated because I had never gotten my membership back. So I was like, well, shit, I got to go to a bishop again and I got to confess all these sins from the past 2 years, right? All of my sins in college that had now piled the fuck up, right? And I was like, oh God. So had to show up. And just so happens that my bishop in the ward that I was in was his father. So I'm now sitting in front of my future father in law, giving him my sins. Again, how is he ever supposed to think differently of me? Like, great, God gave him this bishop lens. Yeah, the fuck right. Like, he totally,
You told him all your business, girl?
girl, all of it. So
Mm.
he knew, like, and he'd be like, so how many people have you slept with? And I'm like a lot. And he'd be like, okay, but like numbers. And I'm like, "God, why does that matter? Like, what is
But you
the,
told them, didn't you?
because I mean, you're supposed to.
Oh,
You're supposed to. So,
girl. Me? Let it be me. I would have said whatever made your little heart happy. Just one. That would have been me, especially if it's a total stranger. See, I think of it, it's different if it's like my husband.
yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
honest. That bishop, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear.
But he was going to be my future father-in-law. So I was like, well,
How he supposed to know how many people you slept with? He wasn't in the room with you. You could
I
have threw any
know.
number at that man.
God probably would have told him. God would have told him that I was lying. Yeah,
I love you.
I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
She
I don't
said
want to fuck
no.
around with God, especially if he's really talking to you. I was like, oh.
No,
So,
I can't.
oh my gosh. So that was a trip in itself, right? So he's the one who like reinstated me. Me
Okay.
and my we got married in the temple. We got our garments. We all the
Okay.
everything, right? I abstained from drinking. We didn't have sex before we got married. Like it was all these things, right? And I
You
was
didn't have sex. Wait a minute. You
with
didn't have
him.
sex with your husband before you got married. So
Mm-mm.
you didn't know if y'all, out of everybody you slept with, you chose your husband to be the one that you didn't sleep with. Am I
Isn't
understanding this
that a
correctly?
backwards way, right? Like is that
Yes,
backwards?
I'm
Yeah.
understanding this correctly, right? You're already not a virgin, you know, had sex with multiple people, but
hmm
I'm going to choose one individual not to sleep with, and that's going to be my husband.
But it's the proof, right? It's the proof to God that I am now worthy to enter into his temple. I'm clean. I'm clean
Mm,
now, even though my
mm.
vagina has had several
Yeah,
things, right?
you've been experienced. Yeah. So you don't even know if sexual compatibility is going to be good.
Have no idea.
Okay.
No, we don't have any
Okay.
idea. But I
All
mean,
right.
it was fine. It was great. It really wasn't it was fine. It was great.
Okay.
So we abstained, right? We ended up going to the temple, whatever, that was fine. Um, and really probably for the first year and a half, I was like so devoted to the Mormon church of like I would read my scriptures, I was praying like daily, going to church, like immersing myself back in the culture, just being like, I am now doing good. I am choosing the right. I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. but inside I still felt like shit. Like I still felt all of this shame and guilt. And guess where that was stemming from? I didn't have self love. I did not love myself at all. So, how was I, supposed to love him? And how was he supposed to know how I needed to be loved when I was just building walls? Like I was building walls all around me.
And I want to clarify something also for both me and the listeners. It's not the praying or the scriptures or the Lord or anything like that that was bothering you. It was other issues that were eating you up inside.
Oh,
Because I
yeah.
want to make sure people are understanding, because you could go to church all day and it's still not, like, the connection is not there
You
because
cannot pray. You cannot pray away. You cannot pray away shame or guilt. Like you really
exactly.
cannot.
Okay.
Like
Like
it
you
is
didn't have a
inner.
problem reading the scripture or doing it, was just there was something bugging you and
Yeah.
things weren't fitting right. Okay, go
Things were
ahead.
not fitting. And it felt so like it felt so infuriating because I'm like,
Mhm.
here I am, married in the church, doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, right? Everything I'm taught. And why the fuck don't I feel better? Why do I still
Mhm.
not feel loved? Why do I still not feel like this hole inside of me has been mended? Because that's what the bishop said, right? The bishop said, repent for your sins, read your scriptures, go to church, become a mom, and you will feel whole, Chris. Guess what? I still felt not whole
Empty. Yeah,
at all.
empty.
And my
Unfulfilled.
husband, there's nothing he could have done to make me feel whole. There's really not. And he was traveling at the time. So that was just another reason that I could be like, I'm not loved. Meh, I'm going to
You
seek
were a
elsewhere
stay-at-home
for
mom?
that. But
Okay.
I was a stay at home mom for a while. And then I was like, I need something. I need to be busy. And so I started working. That's when I really jumped into like being an aerialist and becoming like workout, right? Like I was working out, I was working, I was,
What's an aerialist? Is that like a gymnast?
yeah, girl, like the circus. I would like climb those curtains. Yeah.
Oh. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
So I did that. I was literally just trying to just keep myself busy. And through all of that, like through him being gone all the time and me not loving myself, I was just on a slippery slope and I was looking for anybody that would like, and not even necessarily intentionally. It's not that I would like join apps where I was like looking for it, but it just
Mhm.
naturally happened. I was like 22 years old, super, I mean, I have a bunch of energy. I love people. I love connecting with people. And so I think that just naturally, I mean, I'd have dudes that were like, "What's up?" Like you're a stay-at-home mom and your husband's gone all the time. And I was like, "Yeah, like, um,
Ah.
it was it was a like even just thinking back, I'm like, oh God. Like it makes me feel so like I look at me then and I was so sad on the inside, and it had nothing to
Yeah.
do with, like, because he was traveling. It was because I didn't love myself, and I don't there was
And
nothing that could have happened.
And
Like
you realize now. And this is a good example of it is not your partner's responsibility to make you feel whole. You should
no,
already be whole and together when you
exactly.
enter into the union, because it is not your partner's job. He or she is not in control
Mm,
of your happiness.
no,
That
no.
starts with you.
100%. And with him, I mean, like, I've said it before too. It's not that like he was making me unhappy, right? There was nothing in our
Mhm.
marriage that was like he was doing something. Like, absolutely not. It
Mhm.
literally, I could have married anyone and the
Mhm.
same shit would have happened because
Exactly.
of where I was. It devastates me that, yeah, that's now my child's dad and he is still hurt. Like,
Oh.
rightfully so, right? But I'm also on the other end where I'm like, you can only say sorry so much. You can only change your life so much. Like what, where is that? It's hard to watch somebody who you loved, who you had a life with, you hurt them, right? You hurt
Mhm.
them really deeply. And you've moved on. You've created a really happy life for you and have completely changed. And yeah, he's moved on. He is now married, they have kids, beautiful family,
Mhm.
but I know that there's still hurt, and I don't know if that will ever go away, and it's hard to I still take that on a little bit. Like, I still feel guilt because I'm the one who caused all of that, like, tornado chaos within his life at the
With
time.
with the infidelity. Thanks for tuning in to Fanpale Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.